to discuss already, so what am I going to discuss? I think I'd like to take a step back because this session was on methods. And methods, of course, are tools and techniques. And what I want to take a step back from is who are the users and the uses of these tools and techniques that make them useful? So we're having a lot of conversations about models or a lot of conversations about scenario planning. And I live in a world where I think at the best of times I could describe it as a new medievalism, where I'm working in a combat zone, which is characterized by the Holy Roman Catholic Church and a collection of bishops, an emperor with a Praetorian Guard, and a series of kings and bishops. And in that space, I have to make some intervention work. And that is the real space of decision-making. And a lot of the time, I'm a strategic foresight practitioner, right? And I just want to clarify, when we talk foresight, we're not talking forecasting, because foresight is not about knowing the future. It's about opening up a space to discuss multiple alternative futures that are already in the here and now, that come in quantified forms, or in story forms, or in imaginative and clay-based modeling design forms. And when we talk about complexity science, I'm not quite sure whether we talk social science, natural science, or design science. And perhaps it's actually all of them. So the question is, when we're bringing these models, or these scenarios, or anything to bear, what is the intervention space that we have to work in? And what is it that we can learn from the design of an effective intervention that helps us be better modelers in supporting the users? And I've heard a lot of conversations about modeling, agent-based modeling. I've heard a lot about networked analysis. I've heard scenario planning. We've talked about policy gaming and simulation. And all these tools have their different strengths, but they also have their contingencies. And part of the growth, I hope, of the complexity science field will be attending to its contingencies in practice, not just as what else it brings. So I just want to make a few remarks about the space I work in. And that space is an intervention space. And in that intervention space, it is not possible to think of any future. It is also necessary to think of, in the OECD terms, better futures. Because the imperative for the mission of the organization is to introduce policies, better policies for better lives. So that implies there's a normative element of the future. That brings three different elements of the future to bear in any intervention space: the probabilistic, the preferable, and the possible, or the plausible, as you might call it in the scenario planning tradition. So this opens up a can of worms. And I'm going to say, in the intervention space, the future is a playing field of power. It's not neutral. It's not waiting to be discovered. It's not out there waiting to happen. It's already in the conversation, which brings us to a different skill set than modelling, and that is conversation. So what does it take not just to be a modeller, but also to be a modeller that can produce outputs that are inputs to a strategic conversation? So I'm going to stop there because this is about methods. And I want us to think about methods in the context in which they are used by real people, and what that means for the development of methods, and what that might mean for an emerging field of science.